Well, Joe Rogan has his own theory on the timing of revelations that classified documents were found at President Biden's private offices. Let's watch.
They're trying to get rid of him.
Yeah.
That's what my guess would be. They're trying to get rid of him. If all of a sudden his own aides are sending these, instead of like taking these classified documents, which you have located, and go, well, let's not do that again, and locking them up somewhere. His own aides?
Self-reporting?
Dude.
Come on.
That sounds sus.
Meanwhile, before the long weekend, Fox News' Peter Doocy pressed the commander-in-chief on his admission that materials were found in the garage of Biden's Delaware home near one of his Corvettes. Let's watch.
Mr. President, classified material next to your Corvette, what were you thinking?
Let me, I'm going to get a chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon. But as I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage. Okay, so it's not like you're sitting out in the street. But at any rate, yes, as well as my Corvette.
Back with us to discuss is former special assistant to President Biden and former press secretary to First Lady Jill Biden, Michael LaRosa, as well as founder of the Red Renaissance PAC and radio talk show host Kimberly Klacik. Welcome to you both.
Thanks.
All right, Michael, let's start with you. Look, I understand the sensational nature of talking about the Corvette, and I don't think it's really about it being in the garage per se. But Democrats did make a really big deal of the fact that it was really negligent for Donald Trump to lose track of these documents in the first place. Sure. That compounded with the fact that there is a, to Joe Rogan's point, this is a bad story, the timing of it, the idea that it might have been held from before midterms. What do you make of this argument that in fact it is reflective of his own campaign, his own party turning its back on Biden and trying to dissuade him from launching a re-election campaign?
I mean, the last time I had to respond to Joe Rogan was when he was saying there was a red wave coming. And so I don't know where he gathers his evidence for his theories, but I mean, they're entertaining. Again, like, I don't know if it's ever been reported that the former president takes the law very seriously, but when Biden ran for president, when he was elected, he was determined to set a higher standard. He's always lived by that. His entire career, he's a man of integrity. Nobody has ever questioned, actually, his integrity or what's in his heart. Well, it is Michael. Irresponsible, and he's going to have to eat those words to have classified information. But your script said it best. Found. He didn't know they was there.
Okay, Michael, I mean, I think a lot of people would say there's a questions about his integrity in a lot of different ways.
Where?
There are people who are very chagrined about some of the statements that he made about segregation in the 70s. There are people who don't love that he eulogized segregationist Strom Thurmond. There are people who point to his hypocrisy about the busing issues in the 1970s. There are people who are frustrated that there are things that he promised on the campaign trail that have not come to fruition that he could have done by executive order, like canceling student debt.
Policy disagreements are totally fair.
And there were, I gotta say,
a
series of Me Too allegations made at the beginning of the 2019 season that his own VP, Vice President Kamala Harris, said that she believed those 8 women at the time. So I don't mean to bring all of that into this particular issue, but the idea that Joe Biden is very truthy is something I think that is a propaganda of sorts from the Biden family. On the other side, there are a lot of people who have literally coined the term "Lion Biden" for this kind of reason. So let's go to you, Kimberly. I mean, what do you make of this argument? In an earlier segment, you were saying that you think that the timing of this suggests that there is a bit of a conspiracy to protect Joe Biden or protect the Democrats from having to take this heat during midterms or before midterms. What do you make of Joe Rogan's argument that, in fact, it's the Democrats trying to throw Joe Biden under the bus with this information?
Yeah, I really respect Joe Rogan. Again, similar to what Michael said, I don't know where he gets his information on some of the things that he suggests. I don't personally see it that way, but you know what? I've been wrong in the past. I did want to point out, here we're talking about Joe Rogan and President Biden, and again, President Trump's name comes up and what he could have done and didn't do. And I just want to focus on the fact that this is really about President Biden and the classified documents found at his home. It has really nothing to do with President Trump. But I would say that perhaps, it could be a setup. Or I believe President Biden didn't know the documents were there. I do believe that. He doesn't seem coherent on many days. But, his aides turning it over, I don't know if that's a, conspiracy or to get him out of office. But I guess we'll have to see, because I'm sure that there are many aides that possibly feel that there could be a better candidate in 2024 for the Democrat Party. President Biden did not deliver on a lot of his campaign promises. We saw the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed. Inflation is still absolutely horrible. A carton of eggs these days is about $6 here in the state of Maryland. And so a lot of things that he did say that he was going to do, even like uniting the country, he did not do. So perhaps they do want a different candidate.
Yeah, at the same time, I don't know, who are these aides? These are Kamala Harris deep cover aides who are trying to bring about her presidency earlier or something? Because, Joe Biden did, I disagree with so many of his policies, and I was a little surprised, at least, how well the party did under his leadership in the midterms, given that it seems unlikely to me that, insider operatives are trying to get rid of Biden, because they would replace him with who is the figure that it's actually going to be more successful. I mean, despite, what people might think of him or what disagreements with him, the fact is he kind of delivered twice now.
You're right. And so if you take a step back, let's try to be objective. And I'll try to be objective as a non-former Biden employee. If you just take the amount of things he's been able to do with a margin in the House, the same as Kevin McCarthy, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, he has probably been able to get done. You may disagree with it all.
Right.
And they have, maybe they were compromises. He's a legislator. That's what they do. They make compromises. But he's been able to get done more in 2 years than most presidents have ever gotten done in 8 years. It is remarkable, whether you agree with what he's done or not, it is remarkable how much they were able to get done.
And then his party did much better than expected, given historical precedents, given everything going on. I am being objective because I don't like his policies very much, but I have to acknowledge
and I gotta
when he was
say,
successful.
the man has defied talk about his coherence. He has defied political reality 3 times now. Nobody thought, I joined the campaign when nobody thought he could win. He was certainly getting outraised by Bernie and Pete and Elizabeth Warren. We had no money going into Super Tuesday, no money on the air. He won the nomination. He beat a sitting incumbent president, which is very hard to do by historical standards. And his party really overperformed in a midterm election that typically, by historical standards, this political climate with 40-year highs of inflation should have been a layup for the Republican Party. There's no excuse for the Republican Party it had the same conditions as 94 and 2010. Even worse with inflation. There's no excuse for that party.
Kimberly, why do you this is a little bit afield of the topic we're discussing, but I think it is relevant. Why wasn't the Republican Party able to better take advantage of the economic situation and other things going on? What seemed to a lot of Republicans, I think to a lot of conservatives, as dissatisfaction with the Biden administration, and not translate it into more success. Obviously, taking the House was a success, but it's such a tight margin, and then the Senate was just a wild disappointment. I mean, some people were expecting a very solid Senate majority for Republicans, and it went the other way. What do you think is going on, with the Republican Party that they weren't able to capture that spirit of dissatisfaction? Is it truly the successes of the Biden administration are so impressive that Republicans were not able to measure up? I don't think that's what it is, but what do you think?
Well, I don't know what successes President Biden has had beyond spending taxpayer dollars. They've been passing a lot of bills with a huge price tag attached to them. And like I said before, inflation is not going down. You saw what happened with the gas prices. We were told for over a year that President Biden had nothing to do with the gas prices. As soon as he tapped the reserve, automatically in a miracle, they went down. And I guess he does have something to do with the gas prices. Here's the thing. President Trump, yes, I think he backed a lot of great candidates. But the RNC, there is a leadership issue. Right now, Ronna McDaniel, she's got a lot of people running against her, Harmeet Dillon, Mike Lindell, for that chairman position. And I think that there should be a change, right? We didn't capitalize on the red wave that we should have had. But at the same time, look, we did the best that we could in given the dynamics. We're now seeing the Twitter files being dropped, right? I think we're not taking that into consideration. But there was a lot of conservatives that were censored and suppressed during the election cycle. And so now we're finding these out because Elon Musk has taken over. So there are things that were always put up against us. I don't know how many people thought that we were going to take over the Senate. The House, for sure, could have been a lot better, yes. But in the RNC leadership, we definitely have issues.
Kimberly, yeah, I got to say, Kimberly, I think that with all due respect, I understand that some people's position is that the government should never spend money and the government shouldn't exist. I think a plurality of people think that the government isn't just lighting money on fire, but that they appreciate that during the pandemic, especially spending on things like a child tax credit that half child poverty, all kinds of things that allowed people unemployment benefits, that allowed folks to really survive through the COVID was a good thing. And people appreciated the checks that were sent out were very popular. And again, ideologically, you personally can disagree with those things. I don't know that it's fair to say that it's just spending money as though that money isn't being spent on things that directly benefit, particularly poor and working class Americans. I do want to give you a chance to respond though, Michael.
Yeah, the three of us talked about this a couple of days before the election and the red wave coming. And one of the things that I said was I wasn't always a believer in pocketbook being the reason for voting, people voting in their pocketbooks, or it's the economy, stupid. It's really hard to vote for people. And I gave the example of George W. Bush in 2004. Ohio had one of the worst unemployment rates in the country. No way Ohio was going for George W. Bush, right? There's a big difference when I think what we saw is voters were willing to overlook whatever economic pain they may have felt because the candidates on the other side were just not good matches for their states. They were too associated with Donald Trump. They were election deniers. They were out of the mainstream. People don't like their rights taken away. And when the Supreme Court took their rights away, it changed the dynamic of
You mean
the
Dobbs
race.
and abortion?
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of it had to do with what Mitch McConnell famously said, candidate quality. And that's, if you were looking at the polls, Democratic candidates were more popular than President Biden, which was helpful. And their Republican opponents always had really consistently high negative numbers, meaning people just didn't like them. They weren't likable candidates.
Well, can we talk about why that might be just
Go
for
ahead,
a second?
Kimberly.
That is because the media attacks conservative candidates, especially those that are supported by President Trump, time and time again. Voters, yes, they don't always vote based on their pocketbook. They are also voting based on their emotions, right? We have a lot of misinformed voters that vote based on their emotions time and time again. And when you have the media constantly telling you that these people are awful people, when you go to the ballot box, yes, you vote for the other candidate because you believe in your heart that these are awful people. So again, the media, the social media sites, they were all against us as we were running for office. And I will say this also, when it comes to the Dobbs decision, it's interesting how that leaked right prior to midterms. When it comes to the Dobbs decision, that only gave it back to the states. Nobody's rights were taken away. You can still go and have an abortion if you really truly want an abortion. It was unconstitutional to begin with. And so we just, right the wrong, basically at the end of the day. But again, this is just so ridiculous to me because President Biden has not done anything great for the country. And I will go back to the earlier comments about saying that people were getting, checks from the government during the COVID pandemic. Remember, we were locked down because the government told us we could not go to church. We could not go to work. We could not do things that we usually do. If we didn't have the lockdowns, people would still be going to work and we wouldn't need a check from the government.
Well, we should point out that some Republicans, not all, did put forward a federal abortion ban last year. It's worth noting that a lot of promises have been made about how abortion wasn't actually going to be restricted as a right. We saw in Dobbs that wasn't the case. And a lot of people around the country that might be misinformed voters, Kimberly, they might not know what they're talking about. They might just be media stooges who are deluded and aren't able to think for themselves. But that's a problem that Republicans are going to have to contend with. Just like Democrats have to contend with negative media cycles from the right-wing news. They're two liberal and right-wing corporate news cycles that everyone's got to kind of swim in that water. So I appreciate both of you being
And Biden
here.
is dealing with one of those right now.
Right, exactly. What goes around comes around. So thank you both for joining us. This has been a really rich conversation.
Thank you.
And we'll have more Rising for you right after this.